There's a lot of advice floating around on the internet from so-called experts like Sam Bankman-Fried, who ran FTX, and Ty Lopez, who ran YouTube for quite a while. But is Graham Stephan, one of the biggest YouTubers and 5 million subscribers in the finance space, is he one of those, or is he legit? I went through one of his most popular videos to help people save $10,000 to see whether the advice was true, did it make sense, or did it not. However, here's the thing you need to know about Graham Stephan that a quick Google search will show you, and one thing it will not. Yes, he was a real estate investor, is not a financial planner, and as far as I could tell, he didn't have any licenses to tell you about investing or advise you rather on investing. But that doesn't mean that his advice might not be legit. If you walk out into the street and someone told you, hey, you should buy index funds, that is still solid advice, whether they have a license to tell you that or not. So we're going to go through and investigate that, but there is one thing you should know. He was also someone who was named in the FTX lawsuit for advertising and telling people about that. Now, I'm not a legal expert, so I'm not going to go through that case, but it is something that you should know as well. It is not a takedown of him, but I did want to let you know that that is out there, and this is more so about, is his advice good or not? Let's go through the tips in the video. Some of it will be playing in the background and we'll kind of intersplice those as well. Now, the first thing in the video I think is quite basic, that don't make it wrong, and that is budgeting. If you want to save $10,000, in the video he talked about saving $10,000 within a year, budget and track your expenses. Yeah, that is not, that, yeah, I can't disagree with that. There's a lot of merit to doing that because you want to know where your money is going. There are some expenses that you are likely unaware of, that you forgot were there, especially in a time where expenses are rising a lot faster. You might realize, wait a minute, I didn't know that Netflix jumped from what it was when I first signed up 2, 3, or 5 years ago. Or I don't watch that subscription service like Netflix because Stranger Things is no longer a thing, or something of that nature. It's something I just thought of. But in either case, it does make sense to track your expenses in some way, in whatever way it makes sense for you. Now, it makes more sense, or it's easier rather, to use any sort of electronic app. I guess all apps are electronic. I sound old. But if there's a digital app that just shows your expenses, you can categorize them and track where your expenses are. It's probably a lot easier to go through and cancel that. I'm sure there's an app that is not sponsoring me right now, so I'm not gonna name none. Okay, but I think Rocket Money does that, or some app out there. But there are some that go out there and cancel those for you. So that's the first thing that he talks about in there. The next one, he talks about cutting your expenses. Yes, plenty of people talk about cutting your expenses. He does, I think, which is more helpful, talk about substitutes for a lot of the things that you're currently using. So for example, I have a conference that I'm going to speak at in Charlotte. I could fly to Charlotte, which I think is far too ridiculous. It's a 45-minute flight, 3-hour drive. Now, the flight would be obviously quite expensive. I could drive. That would be an easy substitute for me. But also, gas is high, right? Another substitute for me not to spend, let's say, actually closer to $75 and 3 hours of my life there and back. So it's probably $75 there and back. So $150 just getting there. I could then substitute and consider taking the train, right? The train's probably $65 round trip. There, I've cut my expenses. You can negotiate your expenses, which is something he did talk about. He also discusses negotiating your rent, and that is something that is possible. I did this in New York. My wife and I, rather, did this in New York, where we could bring down the cost of our rent by a few $100s by negotiating an 18-month lease rather than just a 12-month lease. Adding those things up is likely to save you a good sum of money over time. Now, whether you're going to hit that in a year, we'll see. Depends on how much you're stacking in that time, and then obviously what year it is, because 2026 might be a bit more difficult than what it was in the past. But looking out there and saying, what can I substitute for? Can I cut Netflix and keep a Disney Plus? Can I cut all of these things and just go to the library and get things for free? Can I substitute, let's say, my audiobook service for something like Libby, which is completely free? how much are you paying for things? You know this by budgeting, right? You know this by tracking your expenses and then looking and substituting those items for other services, for cheaper services, and for other cheaper items. His third point in trying to save the $10,000 I thought was an excellent one, an absolutely excellent one, and that is the expense of taxes. Taxes, according to him, was 30% of your expenses, which that sounds like it adds up. And it's an expense that you usually don't pay just out of pocket if you are someone who pays a 9-to-5 or pays a 9-to-5 job. Has a 9-to-5 job, that money is taken before you even see it. Now his solution here is to get a good accountant. Now the problem with that is, in many cases, not all. So let me say this. Having a good accountant, I believe, is worth it. Now, to be transparent, I'm also someone in the financial industry and he was also a realtor. So you could argue that, of course, a realtor is going to say that. He's a professional, right? He's going to want to advocate that if you sell a house, you probably get a realtor. I'm someone who's a financial professional, and if you are going to invest and do some financial planning, I would suggest that you get a financial planner too. So there's that. But the truth is, I've gotten to a point where I don't want to have to do my own taxes. I want somebody to find all the loopholes. The tax code is hundreds of thousands of pages long at this point. If nothing else, it's thousands of pages long. And there are some things in that I know for a fact I don't know. I know for a fact that you don't know either. I want somebody dedicated to do that. The thing here though is, if you are someone who just basically has a 9-to-5, you don't have a business, you don't have kids, you're not paying for daycare or anything like that, there might not be a ton of loopholes out there. That's really it. Now, if you do have a business, you do have some more options. I'm not going to get into all the things out there because I am also not an accountant, but I do know there are some write-offs that you may be able to have. There are some credits that are out there. There are a lot of things you can do as a business owner that a regular person cannot have, especially if you're running your business out of your home. For example, you can write off a certain portion of your home and a certain portion of your bills. But again, talk to your accountant. It is much more worth it if you own a business to reduce that expense if you have those things. And you want to make sure all that stuff is legal. So yes, it is more worth it to have an accountant if you have a bit more complex things. So do you own a home? Do you have kids? Do you run a business? An accountant becomes more valuable for you. If you are someone who just has a regular job, nothing else, you're single, you're not living in New York or California where those taxes are already expensive, I'm not saying don't hire an accountant. I'm just saying you're not going to get as much value out of it. All right, so I want to make that extremely clear. But yes, taxes are extremely expensive. The last thing I will say, you want to take advantage of your IRAs and your 401k. So those are pre-tax accounts, and that can lower your tax bill today. You're gonna pay taxes later after 59 and a half. All right, we got our taxes out of the way. The next one he brought up was debt payments. That's a fair one. That is a fair one. Debt payments, meaning what is the interest that you're paying on your credit card. You could argue, what are you paying on your mortgage? We could debate whether or not it makes sense to pay off your mortgage early. By paying it off, that's more money that can go in your pocket. On the mortgage piece, that's a whole different conversation because you're doing that over 30 years. So we can set that to the side. But there is a fair conversation that reducing the amount of interest you are paying can obviously help you save money. I don't think that is a novel concept. I mean, Dave Ramsey's entire brand is built on not having debt, and the less debt that you have, the more that you have for yourself and for financial freedom. Now, the way in which Dave Ramsey is contorting that argument can be debated, and it's not just me that feels that way. But at the end of the day, that is the viewpoint here. Now, if you have a 20% credit card and you can reduce that down to 7%, if you can reduce that temporarily down to 0%, you're taking that, moving to the 0% credit card, you're able to pay it off in 18 months or even shorter. That may make sense because a lot of that money isn't going towards the interest, it's going towards the principal because it wouldn't be any interest. If you can knock it down within that 18 months, preferably even sooner because you're not using a card in an ideal situation, that's the only way I would advise you to do that, then yes, it absolutely can make sense. But you want to reduce those debt payments as much as possible because again, the less going into debt, the more it's going on in your pocket, which means the more that you can save. So yeah, all of these so far check out. And the last one was side hustle. I've been on this train for quite a while. You can only reduce your expenses but so much, and there are a lot of us, and to an extent, myself included, I'm only going to reduce my lifestyle to a certain point. I even said this on the Charles Schwab show as well. When you are younger, especially in your 20s, you are at your peak lifestyle flexibility. It is easier for me in my 20s to eat pizza every day. I can go to Taco Bell, I can sleep on an air mattress, I can do all of that stuff and save at that age. I can take on roommates, I can do all that stuff in my 20s. Now that I'm in my mid-30s, I got kids, I got a wife, I am not at my peak lifestyle flexibility. I can be at my peak earning or closer to it, but not in my peak lifestyle flexibility. There are things that I'm just not going to do at this big age. I'm either just not going to go, or I'm going to go out there and hustle and make more money than do X. For example, I was never going to fly Spirit unless it was an absolute emergency. I'm not flying Frontier unless it was an absolute emergency. My flight was canceled and I had to do something at that airport on that day. If it wasn't that, I wasn't flying. I just can't afford to go. I'm just not doing it. I'm gonna have to fly a mainstream airline. Now, at 25 and I was broke, then Spirit it was. RIP to Spirit. But that is it. I can only reduce my expenses but so low. And if you cannot, then that's when you want to look at a side hustle. So if you take the $10,000 total that you're trying to do in a day, you break it down, that's roughly, I think he broke it down, $27. So if you're taking the side hustle route, you take the $10,000, you break it out monthly, you break it out daily, it's roughly $27 per day. Then factor in, what are we getting from the savings? What am I getting by not subscribing from a few of those services? What am I getting by substituting some of the items that I have? If I'm not eating out, let's say 5 days a week, and it is only 3 days a week, right? What am I saving by doing that? And then what can I replace with a side hustle? For example, right, with some of the skills that I have, and we've talked about this before. Yes, I do financial advising, but I was also a teacher at one point in time. Well, what if I could substitute teach? Maybe I could do that 3 days a week. That's like $120, $130 per day. Can that cover the additional gap that I need to hit my $10,000 goal? And most people, not all, but most people can do that depending on what their work schedule is. That's one day, that's one way. That's an extra 300 and change after tax or so, right? There you go, right? You do that a few weeks, you can see what you can do, over the summer, so on and so forth, and boom, you might be able to do that if you negotiate, if you track what your budget is, substitute some items, and play that out over the year, and you might be able to hit that goal. Now, what I can say is, based on this one isolated video, it was well thought out. It was well thought out. The steps made sense. Was some of it basic knowledge, ground level zero? Yeah, sure. There are people starting from ground zero every single day somewhere. There's somebody graduating from high school, graduating from college, somebody starting over, someone who doesn't know a thing about budgeting, starting over every single day. That's totally fine. And he does graduate those steps throughout. Now, again, I can't speak to his FTX situation. I haven't dug deeper and researched that. There was some banking issue that he started and was suspended. That's a whole other legal thing. So I don't know all of the other issues that he may or may not have. But when it comes to his advice in this particular video, it is solid. It does check out. I would presume based on the fact that he was a real estate person, one who did have an active real estate license. I don't know if it is currently active. His real estate advice is, I would assume, is relatively solid. Now, as we drift further and further into economics, and we drift further and further into investing advice, and you drift even further into crypto, that is where I think the waters could get a bit choppier, and I would caution you as the viewer to be a bit more cautious. And that's to be cautious with anybody, because your investing strategy your specific investing strategy gets a lot more complex based on where you are in life and who you are. Your investing strategy as a parent is different than your investing strategy if you don't have kids. Your investing strategy at 65 is different than your investing strategy at 25. And that's why we've done videos about those differences, and it's why I offer people to speak with me for free at buildingbread.com/callkev, and we can discuss why those things are different for you. There are absolutely times where I would suggest something for one person and would absolutely never tell somebody else based on who they are and what their habits are financially. Your habits do matter. How you react to things do matter. If I talk to someone and they're anxious and they're checking their account every single day, I'm like, hey, you know, crypto isn't for you. Buying this super hot stock that's making everybody a lot of money, that's probably not for you, but it might be for somebody else. And that does matter. But that is an investing thing. That's not a budgeting thing. That's not a putting money in the bank thing. But that is the difference between investing and real estate. That's the difference between investing and budgeting, right? There is a stark difference there. In either case, if you want to learn more about those differences and how you can get started in investing and everything else in between, you can check out this video right here.